Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another meeting of our lecture series here in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Macau. I am getting feedback from my laptop. Apologies. Today, we have the pleasure of a co-authored presentation by Professors Daniel Bell and Professors Wang, both of whom have come here today from Hong Kong. So let me start with some introductions. Professor Bell is professor and chair of political theory with the Faculty of Law at Hong Kong University. He has served as the dean of the School of Political Science and Public Administration at Shandong University. He's published many books, among them The Dean of Shandong, published in 2023, Just Hierarchy, co-authored with Professor Wang, published in 2020, and some other books as well, just a few. China's New Confucianism in 2008, Beyond Liberal Democracy in 2007, East Meets West in 2000, and indeed many others. You're free to peruse the CV, otherwise we could be here a while, I think, many accolades. Professor Wang is an assistant professor of philosophy at the School of Chinese at the University of Hong Kong. She completed her PhD thesis on phenomenology at the Department of Philosophy in Tsinghua University and was a joint PhD student in the University of Paris, after which she became a postdoctoral fellow in the Tsinghua Institute of Advanced Study in Humanities and Social Science. I've mentioned their co-authored book together. This is yet another co-authored project. So before we hear what our presenters have for us today, just very quickly, procedurally, for those who are interested in continuing things informally downstairs at the Port Club, we will be meeting there after things adjourn here around 7 p.m. I think I'll wrap up my introductions there and just ask you all to join me in welcoming our speakers.
Whoops. Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be here, and I've been to the old University of Macau. It's my first time to the new one, and before that, well, first of all, thank you, Ben. And as Ben mentioned, it's my first time here, and I took a walk this morning. I had served as dean at Shandong University. It's a new campus in Qingdao, very beautiful, but also very empty. And when I came here, I discovered it's even more beautiful and even more empty. I took a walk this morning for about 1 hour, and I just saw one person, and then we almost hugged because we both felt so lonely, and it was beautiful to see somebody else. So anyway, so very happy to be here. And what we're going to do today is we also, because our earlier book, Just Hierarchy, we had two very detailed and informative critical comments by two members of the faculty here, Professors Li and Professors Mueller, and we will we will engage with some of those views today to make it more interesting. And if you have any other comments or criticisms, we more than welcome. I think so this presentation will be a joint presentation, and maybe my co-author will go first.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Thank you everyone for coming. Today, the topic of our talk is in defense of social hierarchies in China. Sorry. Okay, great. We published a book with Princeton University Press entitled Just Hierarchy. Honestly speaking, this title can be a little bit misleading because we're not trying to introduce a kind of a hierarchy as a totalism, as a totality. Like the whole society should have one hierarchy. Everyone has their own post here and there. No, we're not. We're not that ambitious and vicious. Yeah, we just want to talk about 5 different hierarchies in different social relations and try to. Sorry. Okay, the machine doesn't like this word. Anyway, just 5 different hierarchies in 5 different social relations. So each hierarchy needs a different kind of moral justification. So that's the plan of this book. And we basically wanted to discuss the we wanted to be sensitive to what historical and the social political context of China. So we are not trying to promote this view to the rest of the world, but just try to discuss from the Chinese perspective, and we leave the possibility open whether it can be introduced to other social contexts. Okay, and this is the Chinese version. And the Chinese version is not completely, it's 30% different from the English version because I will write the first chapter. I'll explain later. And the second chapter, due to the censorship, half of it was like deleted, and the part of the fifth chapter would like censored as well. So this Chinese version looks much thinner, but it's still a good version. If you don't want to bother reading English, you can try reading this one. And and the translation is a little bit tricky because hierarchy is a very pejorative word, also in Chinese, especially in Chinese. Okay, after revolution, we don't want any hierarchy. That's the thing. When we wanted to publish this book in Chinese, we proposed a title that 正义等级论 something like that. 正义等级 sounds quite nice. So the editor said no, it's not nice. Okay, in socialist country, we don't want anything like 等级 in the title of the book. Okay, that's about the title. And also we wanted to have a subtitle saying that progressive conservative perspective, 进步保守主义视角. Okay, so 进步 is sensitive, 保守 is sensitive, and the 主义, how dare you talk about 主义? Yes. So 6 characters out of 8 characters were like just yeah, I don't want to have that. So we keep the subtitle 现代社会的. So we join this 平等 正义 and 秩序, make it more politically correct in Chinese. And how to translate hierarchy in this book? It was also very tricky. I really I'll talk a little bit about English as well. In the beginning, I wanted to change the E in the hierarchy to A. Just not a very good like copycat following Derrida. You know, Derrida changed E from A for différence. So I wanted to do a little bit something like that. Our editor in Princeton University said, no, it's not cool. Okay, so no. Okay, so we keep the title as just hierarchy in English. But for Chinese, obviously I cannot use the word 等级 for the title, yes. So I was thinking about 层级 or 差序 like 非校通. But our editor said no, it's not a sociology book, it's philosophy. So no 非校通. Okay, so 层级 is something to not very well serialized. So no. We were just stuck for that for a very long time. And one day, one of our friends, now is the vice president of Zhongshan University, Chen Jianhong, he proposed that, oh, John Rawls has a 正义论, yes, theory of justice. You're like a 正序论, just change 义 to 序. That sounds quite good. I was thinking, wow, isn't him Einstein? Like, 正序论 sounds so good. It sounds very 正. Now in Chinese, once you use 正名 is one of the most important concept of Confucian. 正序论 sounds so good, so nice. And so socialism, no? Okay, so we use this word. 正序论. So in this Chinese version, I use different words to translate hierarchy, like 等级, 层级, 层次, 次序, 序列, and also use 正序 to translate just hierarchy. So in this Chinese version, you can see different translation adapting to different contexts. And the next slide. Okay, that's the part about, in French we call problématique. Why do you want to write about that? It has we have been thinking about this book since 2017. Initially, Daniel proposed that we can write a book about a hierarchy. I said, no, I don't want anything about a hierarchy. But like after like numerous debates, I was thinking, yes, it's something we really need to talk about. Just thinking about the seating arrangement. Professors sit like closer to the table, and the students sit. Yes, and thinking about the rituals of photos. If there is a conference, senior professors always sit in the middle, and the junior professors stand like behind. No, and the students are not allowed to join the photo session. Yes, probably it's different here. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's another thing. And also, we still in China, we still have something different, like with about hierarchy. If you speak a different accent in Shanghai, local people would call you 外地人，我笑你下下来的。Also in Hong Kong, if I speak Mandarin initially, I usually I don't get very proper like treat. If I speak English, that's another story. So the hierarchies of accent we didn't discuss in this book, but obviously it's something existing. Yes, and it worth working on that a little bit. So and also in I have a oh yeah, also this book. Okay, we have a new preface of Chinese version. We do not write this book for people favor like racism, sexism, or they like caste system. No, this is a book for people feel suppressed by hierarchies. Okay, like how can I argue if like I'm a relatively young female scholar. I used to be in mainland China. How can I argue with my very bossy male, middle-aged or even older 领导? How can I argue that? I don't want to do serving tea for a conference, okay? I really want to present. How can I argue with that? Should I tell him that, hey, boss, can we do some reflective equilibrium? Is that possible? Okay, I really wanted to do that. I don't mind to do that. Is that possible? Probably not. So in this book, we really wanted to provide a new way of reasoning, of arguing for people who are not in a very favorable state in this hierarchical system. So this book, yeah, this is about a little bit about methodology. We named our methodology as progressive conservatism. It sounds a little bit self-contradictory. Please allow me to explain that. Progressive means like we really wanted to endorse modern values, like reciprocity, or like at least very thin version of human rights, as Michael Watson advocated. And also for Confucius himself, he's also a social critic. He basically said, now we have 礼崩乐坏, no ritual exists. And how do we restore that? We need to go back to Zhou dynasty to reestablish the Confucian rituals, hierarchies. Okay, so we followed his methodology. And also, when I talk about conservatism, it also means that we do not want to be so ambitious, saying that we want to promote it and it can be globally applicable. No, we just wanted it to be at least be considered as an alternative in Chinese context. So we wanted to be sensitive to historical, social, and political contexts in China. And now I'll quickly introduce the 5 parts of this book. The first is about a hierarchy in the family. Basically, it's age-based hierarchy. We will know that. Chinese kids, you will know that. In Chinese families, age matters. Okay, and the second part is the hierarchies among citizens. So we have we argued about political meritocracy and its limits, and how can we modernize it with democratic elements. That's it. Although the later part was censored in Chinese version, but anyway, And the third part is about international relations, how small countries deal with big countries, like this Professor Bell would introduce that part. And fourth part, we won't talk a lot about that today. It's about relation with human beings and animals. We wanted to argue that we do not want a relation with cruelty, just we don't want anything with cruelty. And the fifth part is about relation between human beings and the AI. And at that time, we don't have ChatGPT yet, and AI was not so like advanced as nowadays. But we argue that we really do not want AGI, like artificial
General.
general intelligence. We really do not want it to. We don't want anyone to serve the AI. Okay, like now we can clearly see that many people benefit from AI, but so many people they lost their jobs because of AI. Not everyone can be beneficial from this technology development. So we wanted to have a human-centered view that AI is developed to serve human beings, but we cannot as even part of human being to serve AI. That's a very strong part. So you can see that this five part has a relatively Confucian way of thinking that we start from family, okay, and a little bit longer to this country, and a little bit further to the international relations, and to animals, and to AI, and the hierarchies among them it has a tendency to be gradually fortified. Like in the family, we can soften the hierarchy with love, care, support, but in the relation among citizens, probably we will have less of that. And for the international relations, even lesser. And for animals, and till the very end, the relation with AI, we really want like a master-slave relation, human being and AI. It's a little bit strong. Well, we can discuss that in the Q&A session. And today, I will introduce more for the first part, the just hierarchy in the family. We actually, the English version is quite different from the Chinese version. English version begins with quite relatively equal relation among friends. Professor Müller works on Levinas as well, so I use a little bit Levinas there as well. This relation among friends is more like a relation of similarities, like totalities, but relation among intimates is something when you encounter the other. Yes, for some French, from Confucian feminism, they would argue that marriage should be perfect friendship. I completely against that. Okay, not all of us want to date with our friends. Sometimes you date with someone you have absolutely no idea with. Okay, just thinking about like a lot of like stories or TV shows you saw. Yes, I think that's a very true core of intimacy. So we argue a little bit about the hierarchical relation among intimates. Sometimes this one can be leading, sometimes the other one can be leading, but it's not equal. It's not similarity. It's something different. The alternative. Okay, and we start with that. Then we basically talk about the age-based hierarchy in Chinese families. We all know that this age-based hierarchy can generate lots of suppressions. I think many of you had numerous phone calls from your mother that when do you want to have a girlfriend, boyfriend? When do you plan to have a kid in the future? Yes. But in the English version, we try to, I can say, promote a little bit of this idea of filial piety to English readers. But for Chinese version, I basically rewrite this chapter talking about the limits of filial piety in modern China, so that I hope this chapter can benefit readers, especially young readers in modern China. For this part, I can extend a little bit of that sometimes it's not easy to discuss it with, say, someone from Norway. We know several very distinguished professors from Norway, and they told us that when they talk to their grandkids call them by their first name, like Tom. Okay, not like grandpa. And when we try to talk about this filial piety to them, they feel it's quite exotic. They never thinking from this perspective. But still, it's very important for Chinese families. So we still have these hierarchical rituals. That during Spring Festival, some grandkids would bow to their grandparents so they can have hongbao. Yes, and also when in the family we have a dinners. And if the grandparents didn't move their chopstick, you are not allowed to do anything. And usually kids are not allowed to discuss, comment, no mention, not just don't think about criticize when parents and grandparents when they're talking. Yes, that's kind of Confucian ritual still existing. And also the rituals towards ancestors. For the Qingming festival, we need to go back to the hometown to sweep the tomb. Yes, that's why my students didn't attend the class because in Hong Kong I think there's only one day for Qingming festival, but they need to travel back to mainland and back. It takes at least 3 days, so some of them will miss the class. I always let them to do that. Yes, kind of respect the ritual and the tradition. And this part I don't enjoy doing that, so you what?
So again, if there are these age-based hierarchies, we have to ask what justifies them within the family, if anything. And our argument is that, well, I mean, there is a case for respect for the elderly, because if you, I mean, and there's a lot of evidence, empirical evidence, that wisdom increases with age. You know, why is that? Well, as you grow older, so long as you remain intellectually curious and engaged and socially concerned.
Which is difficult.
Yeah, although among intellectuals, maybe you learn new things through different roles, and you deepen your experience in particular roles, and so long as you remain intellectually engaged and curious, then you should have more wisdom. And there's a reason, so that helps to justify that some of these age-based hierarchies. But again, what really makes them justified in our view is that these age-based hierarchies shift over time. You know, as we grow old, you know, the young eventually become old, so they're shifting hierarchies, and the very, very old often become young, like babies who need care from their adult children. So it's precisely the fact that unlike, you know, we're against hierarchies based on race or sex or caste or even class, because those are typically very rigid, almost impossible to change, right? But these hierarchies change over time, usually. And that's part of what makes them justified. That said, we had, you know, Professor Lee wrote a critique of the filial piety, saying that often it's awful for children. And we agree, but maybe you want to respond to that, or? Yeah, I mean, of course we agree with that. But those are the bad ones. The question is, how can they, if they're not reciprocal in any way, you know, if the parents are truly awful, you know, beating their children, you know, starving them, or in the famous legend of, you want maybe talk that to me?
Shun.
Yeah.
Thinking about Shun. Shun's father wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
At least 3 times, according to Shi Ji. Yes.
Yeah. So if those legends are true, or if you do, I mean, there are some truly awful parents, then we think that the kids do not have obligations of filial piety. It has to be partly reciprocal. I mean, if the parents are truly, so that's why we're against the laws that make it compulsory to provide aid to parents. If it's very, very minimal aid, I guess we still endorse it. But part of the law in mainland China, it's not just providing material support for parents. You also have to provide emotional support. It's in the law.
Yeah.
That part we're saying should not be a legal matter. I mean, if your parents are truly awful to you, how can you provide emotional support for your parents when they're older? I mean, that's so we try to draw legal implications for that. Not so much in this book, but in more in your,
In the Chinese version.
yeah.
In the Chinese version.
How do I? So which it's here, yeah? Okay. Yeah. So again, obviously, part of what makes our book progressive is that we just take for granted modern ideas of gender equality. If anybody wants to justify patriarchy, that's good. Go ahead. We don't belong to that moral universe. I mean, frankly, I'm especially me, perhaps more than my co-author, very inspired by Confucianism. But if it turns out like the best interpretation of Confucian, like there's this Confucian in Shenzhen called Jiang Qing, who's very brilliant, but some of the things he says about women are, he argues that's the best interpretation of Confucianism. If that's true, then for me, I'm not a Confucian. Frankly, I'm not going to argue about that. We're just going to assume that modern norms of gender equality are correct, and anybody wants to challenge that, well, fine, but that's not our business. So we just assume that the dominance of men over women is an unjust hierarchy, and the question is how to challenge that. Now, there's a very long debate about xiao, which I think the best translation is filiality, right? Because piety is only part of it. Maybe you want to talk about this part? Yeah, very quickly, maybe.
Okay. It goes beyond a little bit from her book. This 孝经. Next time when you argue with your parents, use 孝经, okay? Don't send those like little video online. It won't work. Use 孝经. Tell them that it's in the 孝经, that you really need to correct your parents' faults if they have some moral. You are responsible for their moral development. Okay. In 孝经 said, well, serving your parents is filial care is the lowest. Okay, serving the monarch, serving your king is the second best, and the best 孝, great 孝. Also in 荀子, 大孝. What does it mean? Means you correct, you prove your parent, like to make your parent trying to correct your parents' moral faults and help them to have this moral development. Okay, remonstrance. Next time we talk about moral remonstrance. This is very important. This is 大孝. Is even more important than giving them like 无后为大呢, giving them offspring. No. Tell them no. On 孝经, male offspring is out of the story. Okay, moral remonstrance is the most important part. That is very important because there is a contradictory among obedience and remonstrance. So there are some professors would argue that, okay, we have obedience, so you should 顺呢, like in 论语, you should follow your parents. You never 色难呢. Serving your parents is hard, but still don't have remonstrance in a very severe way. But in 孝经, okay, remonstrance is very important. So it's very important that you know how to choose the text to use when you argue with your parents. So when your parents want you to have this blind obedience, complete submission, use this paragraph. That's how I teach my students. They feel it's somehow like workable. Yeah.
Yeah, even the Di Zigui, which is a Qing dynasty text, which is used in millions of schools now in mainland China, and that's addressed for young children. And they explicitly say, what if your parent does something morally wrong? It's in the Di Zigui. They say, well, first you should try to, it's very detailed. First you should try to correct them. Well, but what if that doesn't work? Then you wait until your parent is in a better mood, and then you try again. And then it says, well, what if that doesn't work? Well, then you cry, you work on their emotions. This is addressed to young kids, And then they say, well, what if that doesn't work? Well, I'm not going to, that part we don't have to accept. It's like, just accept it. But anyway, so let's go on to the next part. Yeah, so this is more moving on to the third part of the book, and this engages also with part of especially Professor Li, where we argue what is a just hierarchy between countries. And basically here we argue that if large countries and small countries, or powerful countries and weaker countries, are in a kind of win-win relation where they both benefit, ideally in terms of common values, but at minimum in terms of common interests, then we argue that they're justified. And we use a lot. He's my favorite political theorist in the Confucian tradition. We use a lot of Xunzi. Xunzi argues, again, this is probably, I don't know, probably is our translation, because usually it's translated as xing as you're born bad, but that's not, no. So we have a tendency to self-interest or even to selfishness, fine. It's a tendency, but we can improve. We could change. I mean, unlike his students, Han Feizhe, right, where we're born bad and we stay bad. There's no, you can improve morally. You can become more other regarding through participating in rituals, especially that generate a sense of community and bonding and caring among participants. And even more interesting, those with power come to care about those with less power. That's the mechanism. That's why Li, the idea of ritual pride is so central to Xunzi, because he goes into great detail about that. And of course, remember in Chinese, it's Li Yue. So the rituals are usually coming with Yue. A better translation is musical arts, because it includes music, but also dancing and singing. And why is music or musical arts so important for rituals? Because the whole point of rituals is that they're meant to engage with our emotions. They're meant to change our emotions from a natural tendency to selfishness to a kind of concern and care. And it's through this yue, through music, that you come to generate a sense of harmony and engages with the emotions, right? I mean, think of national anthems or whatever.
No, Taylor Swift. Think about Taylor Swift.
Okay. So this is this is a part of, and when the discussion of Yue and it's in and Li in the Xunzi, typically the rituals do combine music, including, I love one of my favorite descriptions is a village drinking ritual, where you're in a village where it's hierarchical, the elders drink first, but then he specifically goes out to say, then everybody partakes of the ritual, including those with less power, and they're accompanied by beautiful music. So you have a sense of harmony, communal harmony, and then eventually those with power, I'm going a little bit beyond the text here, come to care about the interests of those with less power. It's a very beautiful mechanism, very beautiful. So here we have here. You make sure that no one is left out from the ritual, both the senior and the junior. So they're hierarchical. Well, we have to have, so again, this is our point. Any modern society has to have hierarchies. We can't get away with hierarchies. But the morally justified ones have to be designed so that they also serve the interests of those with less power. That's the key Confucian insight. And now we have this, which Professor Mueller has objected to, but I mean, basically this, so I started as anybody here from Shandong province? No? Okay.
So it will be a culture shock to all of you.
Because in Hong Kong, when I spent 5 years in Shandong, when I arrived in Hong Kong, I said, nobody does this. I was a bit surprised. When we have formal or semi-formal meals, like if it was a round table like this, typically they're very hierarchically arranged. The seating arrangements are very hierarchical. Those with more social status are at a certain place, like here, and the main guest is here, and the second guest is here, and then usually. But what's interesting here is that they're not supposed to, the whole point is not to, and this is where I completely agree with Professor Mueller's, theoretical objections. He said, you said they're amoral, but actually I think that they're moral critiques. And Professor Mueller argues, well, sometimes they go against the interests of those who have less power. Like some people might not enjoy it. And here we had many disputes over this because she thinks often women and students feel forced, and here it supports what you say, feel forced to go in to participate of these social rituals, and it goes against their interest. Completely agree as an empirical matter. If that's true, then the rituals are problematic. So we don't agree in principle, the norms, the rituals are supposed to benefit those with less power. If they don't do that, then that's a problem. So, but it's an empirical dispute, not a normative one, right? That's the key point. And also that another point by Professor Mueller is that they reinforce workplace hierarchies, right? If you have this, you have hierarchies in the workplace, and when you go for meals and drinking rituals, you have to have more of the same hierarchy. It sounds terrible on the face of it, right? I agree. But again, the point of these rituals is to soften the hierarchies. Because here, he or she, and it is sometimes a she, like the Xiaozhang, the principal of the president of Shandong University was female. She would sit here. It's not necessarily gender-based, right? At least in university settings. They give speeches. But look at here, what's very interesting is that each of the guests are accompanied by hosts. The whole point is that the guests are meant to feel at home. The guests are meant to feel a part of the community. And eventually everybody is toasted, everybody participates, like in the Xunzi village ritual, everybody drinks. But again, it's not forced drinking. If some people don't like drinking, so you could have water that represent baijiu, Again, this is in a civilized setting. I agree, in some places not so civilized, but at least at the university, more or less they work like this. And eventually a great sense of joy emerges from this ritual. You have a different view.
No, I don't necessarily have a different view. I just provide a more like common settings. Sorry, I'm from Zhejiang, okay? In Zhejiang, how do you sit? Okay, principal host probably would be here, and guests, and probably the assistant host was sitting here, and all of the important people would sit around here. Okay, so usually driver will sit here who is some students. Okay, basically no one knows who the driver is. But in Shandong, no. In Shandong, probably driver would sit here. Like, no, sorry. Guest is 3 or 4. Probably guest 4. Driver will sit here. Okay. He is still with 2 hosts sitting like left side and right side to make sure that he can be served by 2 hosts. That's Shandong style. But in Zhejiang, like we don't care. I shouldn't say that. They don't care about people who are in the lower like ranking of hierarchy. So this seating arrangement is not as bad as Zhejiang style. Okay, I felt a little bit shocked when I went to Shandong. And the interesting part is, which in Zhejiang it won't exist. For the principal host, he or she would toast 3 times. Give toast 3 times. Sometimes in Qufu, the birthplace of Confucius, 6 times. You all know, if you use Xiaohongshu, you should all know Shandong is like 考公大省, When some people have problems dealing with their like 领导, they would ask online, and the Shandong 网友 are always the best answering those questions with absolutely high EQ. Okay, they learn from this tradition. As a small kid, you need to learn how to give toast. Okay, this is 3 or 6, and here would be 2 or 5 times. And for the host 3, you got 1 or 4 times, and 1, 2, and each host, all of this, we have how many hosts here? 6. All of them need to give a toast in a very humorous way, and also that you shouldn't like repeat, like those people said already. You will always need to say something new, and sometimes they recite poetry or I don't know. It's just so difficult for me. That's completely. I feel so shocked, and all of them can do that. They are all well trained to do so, and in the end, in the very end, the guest of honor can have a toast. That always means it's the very end of the banquet. So everyone would feel like because like human beings are animal of language, yes. So after so many like language hosting, there is some kind of also temporary sense of community or sense of dinner table here. So even if they have a lot of dispute in the very beginning till every end, it looks a little bit harmonious. Although probably won't last very long. Probably I'm from Zhejiang. Basically, my parents, when they go for dinner like this, they want to talk about business. Yes, probably this business cannot be done for Shandong. Probably this 课题 cannot be proved. It doesn't matter, but still, it's still kind of a good atmosphere over there. So that's very, for me, it's strange, but quite interesting to get involved. And yeah, okay, you can.
Yes, well, I thought you were well, so thank you for that support. So but I want to ask a question for Professor Mueller. I mean, from the Taoist point of view, does that mean you want to completely do away with those rituals? Or do we agree that in principle, if they work to include people and make people who have less power feel part of the community, are they okay? Or maybe a Taoist would want to have a different, like, would want to mix this more than maybe it would want to randomize. I'm asking this is a question for you, which you can, what would be the Taoist view on ritual, like this sort of thing? Is this bad or should it be mixed more often? Just a. In the discussion.
Okay.
Okay. So let's move on quickly to, so again, the whole point is to generate a sense of social harmony, and especially that benefits those who have less power. And if women and others who feel oppressed by these rituals don't want to participate, then of course they shouldn't be forced to do so. I mean, that's kind of obvious. Or should they feel social pressure to do so? So what about international relations? Well, a similar mechanism where if you have common rituals involving large and small countries, and they benefit the smaller countries, and they generate a sense of common community, then they could be morally justified. So we invoke a little bit about this, let's go to the next slide. So again, we discussed a little bit about tributary relations, which of course historians are very skeptical of and say didn't really work most of the time. But for 400 years between China and Korea, it worked pretty well. There's a very good book by David Wang, shows that more or less it secured the peace, which is very important. And it benefited the Korean government because they had economic benefits from these hierarchical rituals. So they paid symbolic kind of respect to the emperor in China, but in exchange they would get lots of material benefits, and that worked more or less to secure the peace. Of course, now we're not saying these should be reestablished, because now we have this idea of equal sovereignty between countries, and there's at least lip service to this. But of course, in practice, that's not how international relations work, right? Powerful countries have much more say than those with less power. There's a very good, if you know the Singaporean diplomat Kishore Mahbubani has a new memoir where of course, Singapore is a tiny country. He explains how tiny countries have completely different ways of looking at the world and of dealing with other countries than powerful countries. He said he worked at the UN. He says the UN, 美国说了算, whatever the US wants, they just get it just because of sheer power. But if you're from a small country, you have to adhere to international law that respects sovereignty, and you have to spend a lot of time with fellow diplomats through engaging in rituals, building in trust, long meals, heavy drinking. He describes all this, quite fascinating. From a small country's perspective, dealing with large countries is completely different than the other way around. We have to recognize that reality. And of course we see here in Greek photos and so on, look who's in the front, usually the large countries, right? So which countries, which languages are prioritized at the UN and so on, all this stuff matters. So again, these arrangements, though, are not necessarily bad if they have the effect of benefiting the smaller countries or the weaker countries. And the richer, more powerful countries need to recognize that they have extra responsibilities for dealing with climate change and other global issues. I mean, I'm from Canada. If Canada, sorry, can I swear here? Is it okay? If Canada fucks up on climate change, it's not the end of the world, right? But if China does, or the US does, it really could be the end of the world, right? I mean, large countries are different, and they have much more, and they can't say, oh, we're all equal, just as a way of shirking their responsibilities. Large countries have to take on extra responsibilities. Now here we have Professor Lee's critique from a Moist point of view. And the Moists, of course, think that we should all be impartial, right? So now of course that's true. And again, it's more than lip service, it's important. And Xunzi, the great Confucian that I referred to earlier, he does explicitly defend the value of impartiality in politics. If you have a good political meritocracy, like Professor Panway, has written about, and of course, it shouldn't just be because of your family background or you're born into a rich family that you should be promoted. No, everybody should have equal opportunities, and in principle, and that should be the basis on which, and people are promoted on the basis of ability and virtue more than, in Chinese we say 贤能政治. And that should be impartial. And they should, and Xunzi is very clear. You should block promotions based on family relations. Xunzi is very, very clear, similar to Moism. On that sense, they completely agree. But the Confucians say that we can't do away with this graded love. We're always going to have more love and care for intimates. And this extends, right? Citizens will almost always care more about fellow citizens than about foreigners. And that view is going to structure international relations. And we have to assume that that's going to be there if you want to have a realistic way of thinking about international relations. I mean, this may be wrong. Maybe in the future we could have where people think in impartial ways. And Mozart, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, this may be vulgarization of Mozart, but Mozart says even among intimates, you should think in an impartial way, right? Maybe you could correct me on this. But just so there's two reasons why Moism might be a problem if you want to use that as the sole way of thinking about international relations. One side is just, and they're both because they're not psychologically compelling. One is just this view that this graded love is just so deeply embedded, and I don't like this word, but let's just use it, human nature, that we just have assumed it's going to be there. And another reason is a bit more, even more practical and contextual, which is that, and I'm not a dogmatic Confucian. I mean, if Moism can produce more global justice, fine, let's go that way. But in China, never mind the rest of the world, Moism, it's not that, it's not psychologically, it doesn't move people as much, There's one exception. We went to Hangzhou, not tiny, it's quite a big city. Yeah, in southern Shandong province, and there's a Moism museum. And there we actually went with the Shuji of my university, and the party secretary, and he's a descendant of Kongzi, Xing Kong, right? 76 generations. So we went there, and the Mozi Museum, very proud of Mozi, saying, we are much more scientific than the Confucians. The Confucians are aristocratic. We care about ordinary people, unlike you Confucians. I was very upset, and so, of course, but we didn't say, well, we're Confucians, we're still polite, we don't directly argue if we know it's going to be useless. But after that, Shuji and myself, what's that? So there is that tiny little pocket of China where Moism might be more compelling. But in China as a whole, I think if you want to improve the world, appealing to Moism might not get us very far, but maybe I'm wrong. This is more of an open question and a more general question for Professor Lee. Just, I mean, again, it's similar. The question, I mean, let's assume that Moism, how would international relations look like if Moism was the animating principle? Would there be no countries at all? Would be no difference between small and big? I mean, just open question. So I think more or less we could end here. You want to say something?
Yeah, just there's a little bit of a just hierarchy between our two cats in the family. We have another cat. It's American short hair. This cat is 1 year older than this one. So when they are eating, they have their own rituals. Let's say the American short hair is called name is Jojo, philosophy Jojo. He will come to me, and he won't go to the food directly. He will come to me, and I pet him a little bit, and then he starts to eat. He eats first. Then he won't finish the whole cat food. He will symbolically eat a little bit. Then Lulu, this one, she will start to eat. She will eat a lot. Then Jojo would come to finish the rest. And so you can tell that there is a kind of a symbolic hierarchy between cats. That's how we observed. Yeah. So so hierarchy seems like something we cannot escape from, and we really need a good way to argue that what hierarchies can be good, can be morally justified, and most of the hierarchies are not. So yeah, that's why I wrote this book.
Including the hierarchies between cats, some of them are not morally justified. Like, should we say it? Maybe like sometimes the older male cat would rape her, and then we object and we pull them apart. Yeah. Anyway, that one we are against. Yeah. Okay, so we more than welcome critical comments. Thank you for that.
As always, I'm happy to form a queue, keep track of things on your behalves. Okay, we'll start with Professor.
before the presentation. Yeah, just also responding to what you said. Also in the written response, which you just sent to me, I think 2 days ago, you again kind of interpret my point, which is actually not a critique of you. I agree with you on most of the things you said, specifically on the most basic things, namely that hierarchies, which you said on the first slide, that hierarchies are like completely essential to social life and to all or to human life in general, and that it makes no sense to ask to abolish them, right? This basic point, and to try whatever, reflect on the necessity of hierarchies, I'm in complete agreement with that. Now, again, in your response, both the written one and your what you just said, you try to reinterpret what I'm saying morally. Now, that is like my main comment. I think, of course, nowadays, the approach to hierarchy is mostly moral, both the critiques and then your kind of counter-critique of the critiques. It's always a moral discourse. And I think, of course, there is this moral side to it. I'm not denying this, but I was really trying to look into other dimensions of hierarchy. And I think that's important. It gets often completely overshadowed by the contemporary discussions of hierarchy. And then even my response, you immediately applied again the moral pattern. Yeah. Now, my point is more, first of all, a sociological point. First of all, I think it is a problem with your progressive conservatism is, again, not a moral problem. But simply a sociological and historical problem that traditional hierarchies that we find in the Confucian text are very, very different from the contemporary hierarchies. I think the core difference between the Confucian hierarchies and ancient Chinese hierarchies is that they are more or less congruent. That is to say, gender hierarchies correspond to age hierarchies, correspond to rank hierarchies, correspond to economic hierarchies, and so forth and so forth. That is like the whole basis of the, let's say, Confucian approach to hierarchies, that they form like a congruent whole and that they somehow match with one another. They fit nicely what Henry Roseman called the onion model of the person, which consists of different layers that are kind of all harmoniously, organically embracing one another. So whatever level, hierarchical level you have within the onion, it's kind of reproduced in each and any hierarchy that you enter in your social life. Now, a key feature of modern hierarchy is completely different. That is a key difference from the transition of pre-modern to modern society, that we learn to construct incongruent hierarchies. Hierarchies change in every different setting. Just give you a simple example. You go on the plane, and your student may well have a first-class ticket, whereas you as professor may have to sit in economy class, right? But then in economy class, or no matter which class you sit, let's take the example of the flight attendant. If you ask the flight attendant for water, the flight attendant has to bring you water. You're like have the power. On the other hand, if the flight attendant tells you can't use the bathroom because of turbulence, she has the power, or he. Right? So we are now used to a very, very high complexity of incongruent hierarchies, and we deal with them. In a Confucian setting, the example that I mentioned would cause great difficulties, right? That the person who is on the lower side of the hierarchy switches the hierarchy from one moment to the next, right? That would seem very, very odd in a Confucian context. And I think that's a precise difference between traditional, let's say, progressive hierarchies and conservative hierarchies. Traditional one is not a moral thing at all. It has nothing to do with morality. It's just a very different social structure. And whatever, in every single setting, right? Hierarchies are produced. Whatever, in the university setting, hierarchies are produced in every single social context, produces and operates with hierarchies. Again, the point is that they are not congruent. The hierarchies produced in the university system are not the same as those produced in the medical system. They're not the same as those produced in the legal system. They're not the same as produced in the political system, and so forth and so forth. Yeah. So a key aspect of hierarchies is nowadays that they are incongruent. Right? Now, going back to my Taoist point and your Taoist question to me. The Taoist texts were written that I'm referring to in the old days, right? So they are basically addressing the problem with the congruent hierarchies. Now, the main problem, again, from a Taoist perspective, is not a moral problem. It's not the question, are these hierarchies just or unjust, right? The problem is, if you have such strong congruent hierarchies, they become strongly internalized, and they create a very strong sense of identity that you can't escape, right? So, for instance, in the Zhuangzi and the Taoist texts, they show how these very strong and congruent hierarchies create all kinds of psychological problems. They create all kinds of stress. In the Taoist language, they create all kinds of unease. So the Taoist position is basically not a moral position, how to make these hierarchies, which are completely necessary, which is what the Taoists also understand and accept. The point is not a moral thing, how to make them more just, but how to kind of make them more sufferable. How to, it's a therapeutic approach rather than a moral approach. How to be able to cope with the inevitable and very strong hierarchies that impose a very strong, let's say, identity pressure on people. So again, that was also the point I was trying to make. The Taoist point is how to be able to kind of live with these hierarchies. And of course, nowadays we have to understand the hierarchies are no longer the hierarchies of old. And maybe the hierarchy pressures are different pressures. Yeah. For instance, now how can we live with the challenge that we constantly have to switch hierarchies and that the hierarchies are incongruent. These pose very different challenges. But again, the Taoist approach is basically not ask the question, how can we make hierarchies more just, which again is basically the main question that the whole discourse today asks, but it very often ignores completely the perhaps more basic question, how to kind of cope with the psychological and the existential pressures of hierarchies.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. You want to say something? Or? Yeah, I mean, partly it's terminological dispute, but once you say like how to cope or how to make people, how to have less unease, to me, it's like, it's a good thing, right? I mean, or a bad thing. I mean, I don't see it as completely separate from moral issues. If you're asking the question of how can these hierarchies be, I mean, I would reframe it this: how can they be more beneficial so that people have less unease and so that people can cope better and feel less stressed? I mean, to me, it's whatever language we use. It's a question of, and we can differentiate between the ones that are successful at that. We call them good hierarchies, and the ones less so. You don't want to use the word moral, fine. I mean, but anyway. But I think you're a little bit, I don't think, just in terms of interpretation of classical Confucianism, that they're all congruent, that they all fit into a model. I mean, I think the Confucian hierarchies are much more dynamic than what you're suggesting, right? I mean, the whole point of Xunzi is very explicit. I mean, to repeat myself, if you're born into family, it doesn't mean that you become a good official or that you have social benefits. You have to prove yourself. And if you don't do well, then you're demoted in government. I mean, they're very, very fluid and dynamic hierarchies. Maybe now in modern societies, things change faster, so there's faster change, but it doesn't mean that in principle that the Confucians said that all the hierarchies fit together in one beautiful kind of congruent entity. I mean, who says that? I mean, Kong, the monks, the Xunzi, they don't say that. That's a bit of a straw man, frankly. Yeah, but I know, do you?
Yeah, I just wanted to re-mention that the title of this book is called The Just Hierarchy, yes? We wanted to, it's also a pen, it's just hierarchy, it's nothing else. We wanted to mention that it's just a hierarchy, but you can't keep a proper distance from that. Don't 入戏太深 You can get it detached from it easily. It's just a hierarchy, it's not identity. It's not something like a totality. No, just a part. It's just a part of your life. Like when my mother wanted to when I was young, she wanted me to transfer from philosophy to finance. I cannot do that. Okay, there is a age-based hierarchy in my family, but it's just a hierarchy. It doesn't mean like I need to completely obedient to her. Yes, so the other reason why we want to choose this topic is just we don't want to make it like a huge big deal. It's just part of social life. And you can easily detach from it.
Yeah, that said, I would love to hear just very concretely how the Taoists would structure these meals. Remember the meal arrangement? I mean,
Seating.
Yeah, the seating arrangement. How would a Taoist do it differently?
So we'll have it the hierarchy. I wouldn't go.
Yeah. You wouldn't.
Exactly.
By the way, the drinking part, I love it. That's, there we're on the same side. Yeah. Okay.
I want to give a quick response. I mean, of course, one of the things is not to go to but the point is not to have a different ritual, right? It's just to basically the point that I was making is if the dinner table now proves exactly the point I was making. As I said in my response, the dinner is a repetition of work. That's what many people feel. The dinner table reproduces exactly the same hierarchies.
Sure.
It is congruent with the same hierarchies. That
Sure.
was all your paper said that, all everything you said about the table precisely proved the point that I was making, that the dinner is reproducing congruent the work hierarchies and the other social hierarchies.
Sure.
So what I said in my response is, of course, it would be observed that no one does this, right? To organize the dinner table, that the person who has the best voice for singing song sits at the post of the host or something like this, right? No, the hierarchies come from somewhere and they are congruent. And all the traditional texts, show me the traditional texts where the hierarchy between genders is reversed, where the hierarchy between ages is reversed, where the hierarchies between rank is reversed. That's completely not true. The hierarchies always remain the same. It is not the case that in the Confucian text it is said, okay, you go to a different setting and then gender doesn't matter, age doesn't matter, rank doesn't matter.
Okay.
It is that is the whole point.
Okay.
That there is a congruity between the hierarchies, and your dinner table example proves the same thing.
Okay, very good. Just a tiny little brief response. Remember, the point of the hierarchy, though, is to soften. The point of these dinner arrangements is precisely to soften the hierarchies so that when you go back to work, they're not so rigid. Maybe it doesn't work that way, but that's the point. And by the way, on the ritual, remember, so Michael Puett, he writes so much on rituals, and the example he takes from the DG, right, is precisely the changing the ordinary hierarchies to challenge them, right? I mean, and I personally think he makes a little, I don't know if I should say that, little bit too big a deal out of that, example from the DG, but for him, it's so central to the Confucian ethic that the hierarchies dealing with the dead and with ancestors, you're reversing them and challenging them so that people can think of the clash with ordinary life and come up with alternatives. So that's for Michael Puett's interpretation of rituals actually fits with I think a little bit what you're arguing. Okay, so maybe.
A low position, but I would like to ask some question. But why do we have to justify this hierarchy? Like, yeah, like recently I just saw a debate between political theorists John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs. And they talk about the real thing happening in life. How America is having this power and they're on top. And they have no choice but to defend themselves. And all those justice they say, they help some small country, but actually they think it's just to help themselves. They're taking advantage, they're justifying their, whatever we call those things, war, sometimes they start war, sometimes they do some support, but not really support, just to help themselves, to maintain the hierarchy.
Sure.
So why do we still have to justify this thing? Well, maybe we need to deconstruct it more.
You want to? Yeah, I mean, I know which debate, I watched it too, but it's, they're different, right? I mean, for Shamu, is that the way to say? Yeah, I always forget how to pronounce his name. I mean, he thinks they're there and you can't do anything about it, but Jeffrey Sachs is different. He thinks you ought to challenge them. So he has a kind of moral, for him, he would want to justify it and expose them, the bad ones, and then criticize them in the hope that they could be changed. Whereas Mearsheimer is maybe more pessimistic, saying it can't be changed, it's always going to be there. But why is it important to think about this? Well, because we need to be clear about which hierarchies are bad, which ones are potentially morally justifiable, and then we can try to do our best to constrain the bad ones and to promote the good ones. That's the project. Any modern society has hierarchies, and we know there's lots of theorizing about which ones are bad, not so much about which ones are morally justified. Once we're more clear about that, and our book is just a little attempt to provide clarification, there's a lot more work to do, then we can be more focused on eliminating the bad ones and promoting the good ones. I mean,
But I guess a Mullarian point would be like, wouldn't this justification just become a weapon?
if things can always be misused, doesn't mean I'm an intellectual, right? So are you. Does that mean we should stop talking about because ideas can be misused? Of course, they can be misused. But as an intellectual, all you can do is criticize misuses and say this is what you're doing it the wrong way, and we need to do it this way. I mean, what else can we do? Right? I mean, I can use I'm not a military guy. I can't force people.
For the question how those react to Confucian rituals. And one example I can give is those dolls in the Wei Jing period, when people like Luan Ji and Liu Ling, you see how they completely, disrupt the Confucian ritual practice. For example, like according to Mencius, you're not supposed to touch the hands of your sister-in-law, right? South. But Liu Ling and even when he tried to just go ahead and toast him to his sister-in-law, they done a lot of crazy things, but they're very anti-Confucian anyway. So I call them those hippies.
Okay.
So they disrupt the ritual for them just absolute nonsense. So there's a reason for that. And earlier, Georg talked about hierarchy has a lot to do with social luck, of course with social luck and also natural luck. I think those particularly I think hierarchy associated with natural luck would not be. It would be considered very problematic today, like gender and
Race.
race, racial differences. But some kind of a hierarchy, probably for Chinese would be more acceptable. Something we call more fluid, not fixed, like a meritocracy, and like a civil service examination system, which means that with individuals' efforts, you can so-called attain, you can achieve a certain kind of ranking in society, which is by your own, effort, by your own merit per se. So if that kind of hierarchy is open in a sense to everyone, I mean, there's a possibility for everyone to attain that, I think that kind of hierarchy would be more acceptable. That being said, I think hierarchy exists everywhere in every culture. Yeah, even in the United States, you mentioned about accent hierarchy, but I know that in the States, I used to live in Texas. Texan accent is considered very vulgar in the East Coast, and I know that according to the American hierarchy, the one on the top would be Bostonian accent. And I asked why, because that accent is closer to the UK accent. And you see that America has been independent from the British for so long, they still subconsciously think that British accent is much better than some other American accents. So you see that kind of hierarchy. I mean, people talk about equal everything, but as I said, in daily practice, hierarchy does exist. So here, I think that I know that you try to justify certain hierarchy, but discount from others, and it's really dependent on different culture. I mean, each culture accepts certain hierarchies and maybe disagree with some other hierarchies. But your book will be really in a way very interesting to compare with the other book by Professor Li Chen.
We
You can talk about progressive computing.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how you respond to that, because it looked like he tried to liberalize, westernized computism rather than keep certain so-called hierarchical structure. So how's your view on his way of reconstruction or reshaping computism?
we both had critique of his book. We love his book, but we're both critical of parts of it. You go first.
I first, okay, I wrote a comment on his one of chapter of his book is talk about Ren. He said Ren is a care-centered virtue, and I completely, not completely, I halfly reject that, because if care, like Ren is care-centered virtue, most of the women can be Junzi, yes, think of that. He wanted to reconstruct Confucianism in a way that's more women-friendly, but actually it is not. So that's why I said I had 3 chapters on that, 3 parts on that. The first is about how, as we said just now, how filial care is so underestimated in Confucianism. Now he wanted to translate xiao, filial piety, filiality to filial care. I said it can be wrong because Xunzi and also Xiaojing already said filial care is the lowest part of filiality. Yes, you can outsource filial care to a woman. Mengzi said sometimes, not under all circumstances, marry a wife means to find someone to take care of your parents. But sometimes, yes. Okay, that's from Mengzi. And because why? Because men need to do a labor work. So he needs a wife to take care of his parents. And how about those aristocrats and the Junzi? They are busy serving kings, yes? So Shijun, that's the second level of filiality according to Xiaojing and Xunzi. And how about those the second part is aristocrats. Third level is the Junzi. Junzi are busy following Dao and the Yi, proper way and rightness. So men always have better things to do than filial care. So they always outsource filial care, like finding a wife. Yes, if filial care is a central part of filiality, then how can we explain that? So obviously there is a male version of filiality and a female version of filiality. That's a core difference. So what's the part that the women lacks? It's a lifelong education. Okay, so thinking of the Ban Zhao, she wrote the 女戒 for her daughters. She herself is such a successful female politician at her times, but what would she suggest her daughters to do? Blindly following your parents-in-law. Okay, your parents-in-law's will is the rightness for you. And for girls, what do they need to? They need to learn how to speak softly, say nice words, doing the textile, and also learn about family sacrifice. That's all. And usually women would get married before 20. For Ban Zhao, she married to her husband at the age of 14. Thinking of 14, how much you can learn. Yes? So women has no idea what is right, what is wrong. They lack the education of that. So when we talk about moral filial remonstrance, women cannot do that in ancient times because they didn't have time to learn about that. All they need to do is following their parents-in-law blindly. So as we all know that filiality is the root of Ren, that's what Confucius said, yes? So if filiality is so gendered, Ren must be very gendered, yes? So if we reconstruct Ren as care-centered virtue, we lost lots of this essential part of that. That's why I said Ren needs lifelong learning. So for Professor Li Chenyang, he wants to reconstruct Confucianism with care ethics. But from my perspective, care ethics is not far from enough. For being a Junzi, you need to establish. So that's the part autonomy matters. Liberalism still provides us something which is good to reconstruct Confucianism. You need to establish as a Junzi, like 孔子 said, 己欲立则立人, 己欲达则达人. Yes, it's like a part, 己欲立则立人. You need to establish. Means that you really wanted to have lifelong learning and flourish beyond the family, in the society, and even in political field. And for care, you can still have 2 warm hands to care, to share, and to support others. So in that sense, we can say that you have the image of 成人, like humanity, human beings have a spine, and also two warm hands. That's my little criticism of Professor Li Chenyang. And also for him, he won't think 人 is a political virtue because he outsourced the political part to liberalism. Okay, he said for political leaders, if he is a person of 人, probably he cannot punish the people who did like criminals, yes? But for me, it's no, absolutely not. If 人 contains this lifelong learning, the establishment, and for Confucianism, what's the most important thing for political knowledge is to 知人. 樊迟, one of the very unfortunate students in 论语, he was pictured a little bit slow, you know, he couldn't understand Confucius, he needs to ask Zixia, his classmates. He asked Confucius that what is 人? The master said, 爱人, okay. Then 樊迟asked, what is 知? Confucius, 知人, okay. Fan Shi cannot understand. And the Zixia said, wow, how profound our master is. He means that when Shun was governing, he did really know how to select, promote these public officials. That's 知人. That's a political part of 人. So 人 as a political virtue means that you really know 知人, how to select, promote official leaders for proper different rankings in the government, and also you need to care about people. Yes, otherwise you will be like 妇人之仁. Yeah, I serialize this term as well because 妇人之仁. I found 1-2 sentences from 朱熹. 朱熹said 妇人之仁 is like uncontrollable love. You don't know how to control your love, you just let it go. And 妇人之仁 is the term that Sima Qian invented to criticize Xiang Yu. Like Xiang Yu, when he sees someone crying, he would join them crying, like therapists, not a bad therapist. But when it comes to 知人, when it comes to trust people, come to select or promote officials, he has no idea. He completely loses part. So that's 妇人之仁. So actually care is very estimated in Confucian tradition, and now we wanted to re-evaluate, re-estimate. It is good, but still we need to adjust it a little bit, balance it between care ethics and establishment and autonomy. With these two parts, we can reconstruct Confucianism in a way that can promote more gender equality. Means that Professor Li would say, how do we advocate? We really want to care for others. If there are people they don't care, let them, we care, okay? But for me, this is far from enough. To promote a new form of Confucianism that can generate more gender equality, we really want men to do more care, learn more care, okay? Starting with family relations, care about your baby, care about your older parents, not outsourcing this to your wife. And this new Confucian feminism really needs to encourage women, give them more opportunity in the society to flourish, to learn, to flourish, to establish outside of the family. So from my perspective, I think it should be reconstructed or balanced in this way, rather than just talking about we care and care is all. Yeah.
Can I just a quick follow-up? I think Professor Lee used the term care, which actually he borrowed from Carol Gilligan's care ethics.
Yeah.
And he many years ago he wrote an article about care ethics and Confucianism. Actually, I think it's a big mistake because there's a huge difference. And because Gilligan talked about care in contrast with the concept of justice. And he said males are more concerned with justice, while female are more concerned with care. For me, it's really nonsense. I don't agree with that. But I think he tried to say, oh, you see here, the Confucianism, like feminist care ethics, they are much more emotional, relational, emotional, rather than to be rational and individualistic.
Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe in that sense, you can respond to his care here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarize Professor Lee's point in a very bit of a harsh way, if you identify Ren too closely with care, it reinforces the unjust hierarchies with women on the bottom. Right? Yeah. So, and for me, very quickly, I mean, another chapter of his, he criticizes this view that the sage kings should rule, Shangren. Now, because there's no sage kings. Of course, I mean, I agree with that. Who disagrees with that? But then he concludes that therefore we should have one person, one vote as an alternative. But that to me, it just doesn't follow. I mean, to me, it's still important, even though it's highly imperfect in practice, to have a mechanism whereby public officials with above average ability and virtue can be selected and promoted. But he kind of rejects that now. So anyway, but let's have.
Hello, thank you for sharing. And I guess my question is, I want to ask the hierarchy within the Chinese philosophy tradition, actually. So as we might know, the Confucianism has always gotten the attention for at least 2,000 years, right? It's the dominant part of Chinese philosophy. So I guess my question is, how we make sure other philosophers, especially ancient philosophers, can be heard properly, right? Zhuangzi, maybe even the Moas, right? So yeah, I guess it's and how to maybe give a chance to other ancient philosopher and other thoughts, because I guess the Chinese tradition has spent like a long time, with Confucianism already. So yeah.
So at Hong Kong, University of Hong Kong, I'm teaching a course where I put the great political debates from the pre-Qin era. As you say, we're not just Confucian. I mean, of course, all these labels came later, but we can label them as schools, not just Confucians, but Taoists and Moists and legalists. So what I do for this course is I focus on particular problems, like for example, how to reduce corruption in government, and then I put the Confucians and legalists in dialogue, or another one on family law and filial piety, and then I put Zhuangzi with Kongzi in dialogue. So that's one way of showing the importance of the other traditions, is to put them in dialogue with each other, show how they provide different perspectives on contemporary issues, and that's one. And so I do also with Mozi on the issue of whether the government should fund the musical arts. Of course, Mozi is against it, and Xunzi and the Yueji would be for it. But both of them have good arguments. So putting them dialogue with each other and then letting the students decide and argue about it. That's basically what I do. I'm not sure it's the right way. It's only one way, but it's one way to show that you have great political traditions in that were in dialogue with each other, often in a not always polite or civil way. Like probably Han Feizi, if you take his views seriously, would want his teacher to be executed, right? But anyway, at least it's important to put them in dialogue with each other.
Yeah, for me, I teach Neo-Confucianism from Song and Ming dynasties, and actually half, at least 30% of this course, I was teaching Buddhism. Because if I didn't prepare my students with Buddhism, they cannot understand Neo-Confucianism. They have no idea why we talk about Tianli or Li Shi or Li Yi Fen Shu. It's difficult if I just go directly to talk about Zhu Xi, Cheng. It's too difficult. And also Confucianism was hugely transformed with this challenge from Buddhism in Song and Ming dynasties, and now Confucianism is heavily challenged by liberalism as well. Now it's our new tradition. And also for Taoism, I told my students, although I don't teach that, my other colleagues teaching it. He teaches both Taoism and Buddhism in school of Chinese. I told my student that if you really want a female-friendly philosophy from China for Chinese people, Taoism is a better chance. And also for me, I need to snitch a little bit from Taoism to make my so-called Confucian feminism looks better, looks more Chinese. Yeah.
And I would like to answer the question for me. So I want to clarify that I totally didn't want to suggest in the detailed book review that I believe Morrison is a better normative theory for international relations. This is not the point I want to make. If there's critique, but I would say it's not so much of a critique, but more of a question or a suggestion, because my impression from reading your manuscripts is that many of your arguments, including the Xunzi arguments, are Morris arguments, sounds very Morris to me. So that's why I wonder why you want to emphasize that this is a Confucian insight or this is a Confucian argument, while many of them I consider to be most arguments. So this is more of a question, but you just answer that question is that for marketing reasons, which I accept. If you are going to say, hey, my book is going to be about most international relations theory, probably not many people are interested in that. So for commercial or marketing reasons that you choose to use the label Confucianism, which I actually accept this approach. And as to the graded love that you just mentioned, I don't want to answer. I don't want to give a very detailed answer. We probably can discuss this later during the reception. I think Morrison might sound better than Confucianism, if we accept this label, is that he disagreed that we can extend this interpersonal feelings, such as graded love, to interstate relations, because the emotional feelings that we have towards other individuals doesn't necessarily apply to the relationship between states.
Yeah.
So this is my quick response to your comments.
Yeah, well, I agree, but so the first part, and I agree that in our book we should have emphasized that there's a lot of Xunzi, as you say. I mean, the arguments about impartiality clearly come from Mozi, and we should have emphasized that. But on the other hand, he's also so critical of Mozi, right? On the chapters on D and Yue especially, he really is so. But probably he should have recognized that actually I took on the good part. I mean, that's why I like Xunzi, is that he really takes on the best parts, what I consider to be the best parts of other traditions, and puts them into a coherent whole. But he should have semi-coherent, not congruent. He should have admitted more explicitly that he was drawing on Xunzi, especially for this part on political meritocracy. Yeah, and it's not so. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't. When we wrote this book, especially the chapter 3, we should have been more explicit and that it's congruent with a lot of what Mozi argues. Yeah. The last part, though, of what you said, which, yeah, pardon me?
Graded love.
Yeah, graded love. So what's interesting is that, yeah, of course, you can't say that, the relation between two people is the same as the relation between two states. But on the other hand, when diplomats engage with each other, and that's what's interesting, I mentioned already this Kishore Mahbubani memoir, to really get things done, diplomats have to get together and they have to gain their trust. And it's through these eating and drinking rituals. And it's especially important for the weaker states. This is how you gain their trust and how you get things done. So you do have interpersonal relations among state leaders that are very important and that are similar in many ways to the interpersonal relations that you have in family or friends or school settings.
Yeah, also from a comparative perspective, Aristotle also said that in the Nicomachean Ethics, chapter 5 on justice, he also said that it exists friendship between states, like cities. He called polis. Different polis, they can have a kind of friendship, although it's not real friendship, but this friendship is very important. Basically, he doesn't mean like two states, they have friendship, but the leaders, they have kind of friendship that can benefit both states. Yeah.
That brings us to a close for the formal part of today's discussion. Could we all come together in thanking our speakers?
Thank you. And thank you for this. great.
As aforementioned, some of you may wish to continue things informally downstairs, so we'll see you.
So there's a ritual of eating and drinking, right? Oh, really? Oh, well.